Hi, so in this video I'd like to show you how to put together a HEAVYCON plug assembly. And to start things off, let's look at some of the components and tools that you're going to need to put this assembly together. So first, you're going to need a screwdriver for driving the mounting screws or some coating options if you so desire to have coating on this assembly. And then we're also going to need channel locks, this UNIFOX wrench here for tightening down the cable glands. As far as the components go, you're going to be looking at inserts, and these are modular inserts. There's a whole variety of these, but these are the ones we're going to use in this video. And they would be assembled into this modular snap-in frame to hold those all in place. And once that's all assembled, they can go into our HEAVYCON housings, which could be a single or dual entry housing. And finally, on the back side of that housing, there'll be some kind of cable gland, and that'll be tightened down to provide a seal. And that's all going to wrap around your cables. And you're going to want to have this wiring pre-prepared by cutting back your outer jacket so you have room to work with the wires. And then you want to strip and ferrule your individual wires so that they're ready to be inserted into HEAVYCON inserts like these here with PT terminations. So with that, let's get into actually building up this assembly and start with the modular frame and getting that prepared to accept the inserts. So in this first step here, we want to get the modular frame ready to accept the inserts. And to do that, we want to replace mounting screws with these coating profiles. So if you're going to use a coating profile in this assembly, we want to do this first before we start putting inserts in place and trying to install this in the housing, because this will be used to mount this modular frame in the housing. So the first thing we want to do is you're going to look at your assembly instructions and find out which mounting screws are going to be replaced and in what pattern they're going to be replaced, because these can come as just a single peg, or they could be a pin and socket like I'm going to show you here. So to get things started, let's take out one of these mounting screws and replace it. So the first thing you want to do is just come in here and give it a little bit of back pressure, and then take your screwdriver, get that in there, and then get the threading started into the frame itself. And so once you get that started, it should come through pretty well. So now we have our screw out, and we want to insert the coating profile well. So I can start threading this in by hand and then come back in with my screwdriver and just get that all the way through the frame so that the threads push all the way through and the coating pin is loose, just like all the other mounting screws. And now that we've added our coating profile, we're ready to start assembling the inserts. So now that the modular frame is ready, we're going to start installing inserts into the modular frame itself. On the frame, you're going to notice that there are some letter markings that indicate slots to identify each slot. So you've got A, B, C, and D. So slot A, B, C, and D corresponding with the letter code. This is important so that if you're not building the other half of this mated assembly, you will need to follow the assembly instructions to make sure that each module gets put into the proper slot. To do that, each modular insert is polarized with a wide peg and a narrow peg, which matches up with the slots on the frame itself. And so if you try to put that in the wrong orientation, it will not fit in. So you spin that around, and each one has its own retention springs to lock the insert in place. So it just snaps in like that. And so you can come in, oh, didn't get that right. We'll put this around, snap that into place, pop this one in. Now the dummy module doesn't have that same polarization. It's not important for that. For these it is, of course. So we can just pop that in either way. If I did make a mistake and I put the wrong insert into the wrong slot, I can pull those out. That's easy enough. These retention springs pull up a little bit, so you can pull them, pop that out, and reinsert it into the proper slot. And now that that's assembled, we're ready to go ahead and start our wiring. Alright, so now that our insert assembly is ready to go, it's time to start wiring. So first you're going to have your pre-prepared wire. Obviously this would continue out to wherever it's going to go, another plug, a device, what have you. And then you're going to have this stripped down, the jacket's going to be stripped back, and you're going to have your wires already stripped and ferruled. So what you'll do is you're going to feed them in first through the cable gland, get them fed in through there, and that would continue down the cable. Then your connector housing, you're going to want to feed that in through where the cable gland will eventually attach, and then you can start wiring up your inserts. I'm going to slide these off here just for purposes of demonstration. Alright, so with this setup here, we're using PT mechanisms, or push-in technology. You're going to want to take your wire with your ferrule, and to feed that in and lock that in place, all you do is simply push the wire in and lock it in. Now if you make a mistake about where that's supposed to go, you can come back with the screwdriver, push the plunger in, and it'll release the contact or the ferrule in the wire, and you can pull that back out and reinsert it where it needs to go. Now as for where to install this, we're going to refer back again to the slot markings A, B, C, and D, so that'll identify which insert you need to bring the wiring to. And then on the back of the inserts, or sometimes on the front if there's not room on the back, but in this case the markings are on the back and they'll be numbered positions 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you'll refer to your assembly instructions, find out which wire goes into which insert and which position, and then you'll start assembling that up and getting that ready to go. So I'm going to start feeding some of these in here. Just hold this up so you can see a little bit of a different angle. So each one of these should be locked in. You might want to give it a little bit of a tug afterwards to make sure that it has fully engaged. You can also see that the plungers are down a little bit. And so let's see here, get a couple more pushed into place. I didn't get that one in, so I have to come back, make sure that I have it in all the way. Good. And one last wire here. Alright. And that is wiring up to the modular insert. Now once you have that, obviously these are still going to be down here on the back of your wire. So you can take this insert body and you're going to feed that into the housing and get that lined up, and you're going to hold that in place there while you come back with your screwdriver. And we're going to get our screws started, get them started mounted in here. Just make sure everything's aligned. We want to start a couple, make sure that they're all in the right place. Okay. Same thing here with the coating profile. If things aren't lined up, they won't go in. So we get that. Okay, that's good. And now I can start going back and tightening up screws to get everything in place and lock it in. And that one felt like it was a little off. Get that lined up properly. And okay, so that's in there. Now, if you've got some excess wire, you want to make sure that this cable jacket is engaging with the seal and the gland. So if you need to, if you had the wires a little long, you can push that into the housing some. Now with these EVO adapters, there's no threading. It's just a turn and click into place. So what you can do is you can either, depending on how your specs are for the assembly, if it's supposed to be side entry or top entry, you can go either way with this and attach this on. And it's just a little bit of a turn here. You snap that into place and it's locked in. Now these lock in pretty hard. This is a demo piece, so I could pop this off again, but when you're working with production parts, this will lock into place and won't come off unless you wrench down on it, and you'll probably do some damage to the gland. Get some tool marks on that and that if you have to take this off. But you can snap that on either way, and once you've put that into the position you need, it's time to tighten down the clamp, the cable gland. So that's where we're going to come back, grab our UNIFOX channel lock wrench, and we're going to get that snapped on here, and then we're going to tighten this down until it's right down on the cable and giving you a good seal. So you'll want that in there and sealed up against the cable jacket, and now you have a complete connector assembly. So I showed you how to do a connector assembly with a single entry onto the housing, but it's possible you will have a dual entry housing that you have to assemble as well, where you'll have two cables coming into the connector assembly. So it's really not all that different. You have one cable assembly hooked up already, plugged in, terminated, everything's fed through. All you have to do is then feed through your other cable and through the other gland, through the housing, and then terminate the wires. So again, I'll slide this out here. You can go through. Again, you're going to follow your specs for what wire goes into which position, and then just terminate your wires one at a time here. That one, that one. Okay, they're all going in. And this is just that push-in termination. Just take your ferrule wire, fit it in there. If you had stranded wires, all you would do differently with that, let me pop one of these out and I'll show you stranded wire. Stranded wire would simply, you would take the plunger, push that in and hold it in place. Take your stranded wire, feed that in, release the plunger, and that'll lock in place as well. But it is recommended that you use a ferrule. It makes things a lot easier. You can still use the plunger and put the ferrule wire in and do that as well. But once you have all of your wires in place, you can bring your housing back down over the cables, and again, just like before, we're going to tighten up all these screws and get this locked into place here. That. And then you bring your cable glands back down the cable onto the housing. Again, these can still go top or side entry. I know that these are going to want to go top entry though, and if I need to, I have to push this down into the housing so I get my jacket, because you see the jacket isn't lined up with the seal, so we want to make sure that we push that down in. There's room in here for the wires to go, so that can go down in there. Get that down, and then we can start tightening up our cable glands. And there you have it. So you have a dual entry assembly here as well for two cables coming into that one insert. And that's it. That's all there is to it.